In today's video, we're taking a look at the future of Patrick Kane in Chicago. Could we see a trade well ahead of the deadline? We'll discuss an article reviewing that situation. Plus, will the Matthew Barzal contract extension impact negotiations for Dylan Larkin? And what limits will the Red Wings have on getting a deal done? And could we end up seeing a trade if they can't reach a deal? And of course, we're also going to look at New Jersey. They also have issues. Maybe a trade will come to kind of shake things up. We've already got Fire Lindy Chants going on the weekend. It's a mess there already. Plus, we have lots of injury updates, news from the waiver wire, and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to take a look at today. First up, of course, the news from the waiver wire. Of course, Sonny Milano was on waivers. We knew that because the Washington Capitals signed him to a new contract yesterday, 1 year for $750,000, but it required him to clear waivers since the season's already been underway here. No team claimed him, so the Capitals get to keep Milano, and they intend on assigning him to their American Hockey League affiliate in Hershey, where he will start the season and eventually should be able to be called up here, but obviously they want to give him some time to get acclimated and kind of get some reps down there before he gets an NHL opportunity. So I know there was a lot of talk and speculation about other teams, especially teams that are higher in the priority list when it comes to the waivers, like Montreal, Arizona. There's some talk that maybe they would put in a claim, but they did not. Now, in case you're not clear, because I did hear a lot of questions on that here today, basically how things work when the season begins is the waiver wire options for making claims is based on the season-ending standings for the first 20 games. So around November the 1st is when things will switch to the new season. So up until then, the first month or so of the season, they look at the standings from last season, how they ended. So of course, Montreal was in last place, so they have first priority and so on. So it's like a reverse order of the standings is the priority list for putting in a waiver claim. So they have first dibs. So multiple teams can put in a claim. Sometimes that happens, but whoever's lower in the standings gets to keep the player. That's how things go on that front. So until we get into November, things are all based on last year. So that's why some thought Montreal might try because they would have first dibs on anybody that's on the waiver wire until we get to that point in the season. But they chose not to do that. We do have a new player on waivers today, and that's Anders Bjork in Buffalo. Now, of course, he's had a tough time since he's gone to the Sabres from Boston. He only had 8 points in 58 games last year, and so far he has not played in the 22-23 season so far. They've played 2 games so far. Bjork has not been in the lineup, so I would suspect they're going to try to get him some playing time in the minors if indeed he clears. Maybe we'll see a situation where he could be traded after the clearing waivers. That happens a lot, and this question comes up all the time. Because for some people, you may not completely understand how all that works. Why is there a benefit of doing a trade for a player when you can get him on a waiver wire for nothing? And it just really boils down to the fact that many teams can't take a new player on without a new contract and a new player of their own going out. Then they have the option of putting that player in the minors sometime before they've played 10 games or been on the roster for 30 days. So it just gives them some more flexibility that way. Lots of injury updates around the league. Tyler Bertuzzi for the Red Wings is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks with an upper body injury. Of course, Detroit's got off to a good start to the season, so losing one of their top 6 wingers is certainly going to be a big blow. That's not going to be good news at all. They're also going to be without Jacob Vrana. Not sure the exact timelines. It was just listed as personal reasons, so we don't really know what's going on with Vrana. Hopefully he won't be out for too long. Of course, we know the Boston Bruins are dealing with their fair share of injuries, especially on the back end. And now you can add Brandon Carlo to the list of injured reserve defensemen that they're dealing with. So this Bruins team, has had a good start to the season, considering all things, especially their forward group so far is carrying things. Goaltenders have been good, but the back end certainly has some question marks, but some of the guys filling in are getting a bigger role than they may have otherwise, we could say, have been doing well so far. So we'll see if that can continue. That's going to be necessary for them to continue with a push here to have another strong season. I know there's a lot of people, myself included, were really concerned that they would take a step back this year because of all the injuries. So far, that doesn't appear to be the issue. but it's early and we'll have to wait and see how things go. The Vancouver Canucks appear to be getting Ilya Mikheyev back, which would be great for their lineup. Of course, the Canucks have lost their first 2 games, so that's certainly not the start they wanted, especially in the fashion that they went and played those games and ended up losing, blowing leads. JT Miller was on for all the goals against, or pretty well all against, so I know he's frustrated. Not the start to the season that the Vancouver Canucks were hoping for at all, and I think fair to say that Bruce Boudreau certainly feeling the pressure there in Vancouver based on the fact that he's in the last year of his contract and how everything went in the offseason. I don't know how long it would have to go on before they would make a decision, but I can see if the first 20 games don't go well for Vancouver, that Rutherford and Alvin wouldn't be shocked if they go in a new direction and remove Boudreau as head coach. But there's a ways to go before that really becomes a bigger point of discussion. At least I think it is anyways. Jake Allen will be missing tonight's game for the Montreal Canadiens. He is going to be missing the game due to a parental leave. His wife was due to deliver their 3rd child today, so certainly want to congratulate Jake and his spouse, and obviously welcome yet another young baby into their family. So certainly good reason to miss a game, of course. He should be back here in the next couple of days. Nikita Zaitsev of Ottawa also injured, but he was skating this morning. Not quite clear if he will be available for the Sens home opener or not. I know a lot of Sens fans don't want him in the lineup and are questioning why he played over Nick Holden in the last game, as he did leave the 3rd period, and I think he missed like the last 7 or 8 minutes of that game that they ended up dropping to the Leafs. So certainly Zaitsev, as much as he's not a popular figure in Ottawa, I certainly understand that he has not played well for the better part of the last couple of seasons, but I will say that in the game against the Maple Leafs, that he wasn't the issue. As much as he played limited minutes, he wasn't playing a big role like he had in the past. And he didn't notice him out there, which for some defensemen is a good thing. Didn't really see any major mistakes, which is good. The team did again have another, it wasn't a very long stretch, but still it was costly little stretch where they had a bit of a defensive lapse, which led to the go-ahead game-winning goal by the Leafs. So that's a couple times now that the Senators, in their first 2 games of the season on the road, have had a good start, scored the first goal, and then ended up having a bad relapse of defensive zone coverage, and they paid for it. It's just that simple. Matt Murray, of course, is on long-term injury reserve. I just want to touch on this again here now that we know a little bit more about the injury being an adductor injury. I know they really weren't clear, and they don't know exact time frame for Murray to be out. For the Maple Leafs, as we talked about yesterday, it very well could turn out to be a little bit of a blessing, as much as you don't want to have an injured player and deplete a position like goaltending. The cap flexibility that this gives them is quite substantial, being able to put his contract on LTIR, bring up more players so they can have a closer to a full roster here. So that part is a nice spin-off of a bad situation. But I know there's been times in the past that goaltenders have had this kind of injury where they've ended up being out a really long time. So it really very well could be a situation where this might not be a situation where he's out a month. Like, it could be much longer. I know one of the goaltenders that I know for Ottawa fans that obviously with Murray being a former Senator, is this happened to Dominic Hasek way back when he was in Ottawa. Of course, he wasn't there too long, but he missed the big chunk of the year. And when he suffered that injury, he ended up being out the rest of the season. So certainly it's a potential injury that just can be tricky on recovering from, and it is possible that it's, hard to say. I don't want to speculate and say he's going to be out all season, but it is quite possible Ilya Samsonov is going to have to run with the net here and be the starting goaltender for an extended time. But as I had predicted before the season even started, I really thought Samsonov has the better bounce back potential and had the better likelihood of becoming the starter and kind of being the guy for the Leafs anyway. I had more confidence in him than I did in Murray, because of the fact that Murray just can't seem to stay healthy. We're going on like 3 to 4 years. And look at his last couple of years in Pittsburgh. Injured a lot. 2 years in Ottawa. Injured a lot. First year in Toronto. Already off to a bad start with injuries after only playing 1 game. So certainly not what you expect. Like, it feels like he's made of glass. Like, it's just like the guy can't stay healthy. And it's just it's his detriment to his games for sure. Now, of course, we saw some interesting situations with the New Jersey Devils on the weekend. Of course, we're only a couple games into the season, And during the introductions of the team, when Lindy Ruff was introduced as the team's head coach, he was booed. And then during the game, they started with a "Fire Lindy" chant, which was going quite a bit. So fans are already all over this team and want the coach fired, even though it's, like I said, we're only a couple of games into the season. So I know in a lot of cases, 1 or 2 games, and most of the time, I stress most of the time, is an overreaction. But you get that a lot. A lot of fan bases overreact in positive ways and negative ways early in the season. This is very much a common thing, and it's nothing new. Ever you see a couple of wins and you get teams planning, the fan base planning a cup parade, you get a couple of losses and they want everybody fired. That's just the way the sports fan seems to be reacting. And with social media taking on the life that it has in the last number of years, it's just that much more easy now to get your opinions and your voice out there. And that's just the way things go. Then, of course, you get it going on in the arena, too, for the coach to hear. And in his post-game interview, like, he took it on the chin. Like, he's like, he understands. Like, what's he supposed to say, right? He said this team, the fans of this team expect W's. They expect more winning. They're frustrated with all the losing that's gone on as this team has rebuilt for the last number of years. And they want better. And really, who can blame them? Every fan base wants that. This team is... fan bases of this team has gone through a lot, and they've been waiting for this winning product, and they do have a lot of good players in New Jersey. But fact is that this team cannot defend very well, and goaltending has not helped them out either. Now, you can't blame it all on goaltending, that's for sure, but I do wonder, though, if a Mackenzie Blackwood trade is something that they'll take a look at just to see. He's got 1 year left on his deal, which is the current season at $2.8 million. He's 25 years old, and he's really lived up to be the guy they were hoping for when he was drafted and that he gradually developed into here over the last number of years. The guy is not a real solid starting goaltender. They keep hoping he's going to be, and he hasn't come into that yet. So considering the age he's at, is it going to happen? It just seems unlikely. With Vitek Vanacek, is he a better option? Maybe, but it's not a strong upgrade. So really, you kind of wonder what's going to give here. I know that Jack Hughes was a fan of Lindy Ruff and spoke out for keeping him at the end of last season. So I'm sure they're not going to want to upset their star player, but at the same time, they got to take a look at things here and be like, okay, something's got to give. We need to get this team some better goaltending, and we need to get this team a coach that can take them in a better direction here. The New Jersey Devils have they allowed the most goals in the league during the Lindy Ruff tenure as head coach. And you might say, well, maybe it's not the coach's fault that the team hasn't been good. We're looking at personnel, which is not his area. That's the GM. That's Tom Fitzgerald. However, you go back to his previous gig as head coach, was with the Dallas Stars, which was a 4-year span from 13 to 17. They were the 4th worst team in goals against during his tenure there as well. So he's got a history of recent coaching experience in the last 4 to 9 years, of course, between the two spans here, of not being able to defend and giving up way too many goals. So at the end of the day, I do think a lot of this is on the coach, but it's also on the manager, and it is also on the players. There's no doubt about this. But I would think that considering how antsy the fans are, I think a few more games, if we don't see some winning quickly turned around, and I'm not sure that we're going to, that we're going to probably see some kind of change come quickly here in New Jersey. But then, of course, you're going to get the fan base, and a lot of media is going to probably question the team and the management and say, well, let's say they fire Lindy after 5 games. Why would you even bother bringing him back if that's the case? Well, why didn't you just make the change at the end of last season? Now, they brought in Andrew Brunette as well as an assistant coach. So, we know he was recently a head coach, went through a tough situation in Florida. A lot of people felt he wasn't treated right when he was basically let go after, didn't get a good playoff result, sure, but, had a good regular season after, taking over from Joel Quenneville. Under those circumstances, that was tough. And I know Andrew Brunette probably has ambitions to be a head coach in the NHL again, and I have no doubt he will be at some point, whether it be New Jersey or somewhere else. But at the end of the day, they have Lindy Ruff's coaching replacement already on the bench. I have no doubt about it. So I don't think it's going to be a situation where we have a lot of rope here. I would say that if things don't get better quickly, that you're going to see a coaching change. It's going to be Andrew Burnett taking over. And like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if they maybe find a way to move along from Mackenzie Blackwood and see if they can't swap goaltenders. I know his value is low right now, so a trade might not be easy. But considering that they only have him signed for this year, maybe they retain some salary. Could he go to a team that's maybe in a little bit more of a hard-up situation? I don't know where they really want to look around the league, but, like, you know, they got to do something. Maybe they put him on waivers even. Like, I don't know what they do, but they need to find some goaltending, and they need to get some make some adjustments to their coaching staff so that these guys can learn to defend. It's a young, I mean, Mike McKenna on dailyfaceoff.com talking with Frank Saravelli today, and he described them as an immature team that can't defend. And then sometimes you get teams that can't defend well, but their goaltending is so strong that they cover up a lot of the mistakes. That's not the case here. Like, Carey Price covered up weaknesses of Montreal for years, but he was such a good goaltender that even with a defense core that at times at least wasn't elite, you wouldn't know it because he made remarkable saves and kept them in it most nights, right? So that can happen, but this is not happening in New Jersey, and I suspect the fans want something, and they want something quick. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out there. Now, when it comes to Dylan Larkin, you have to think that Matthew Barzal contract extension is likely going to play a role in negotiations there. Now, there's a new article in The Athletic today from Pierre LeBrun where he analyzes a few things, including the Larkin contract situation and Patrick Kane, which we're going to talk about here shortly, but talks about the fact that the Barzal extension will likely have an impact. Now, of course, the Larkin situation is a little bit different. Barzal is a year younger, and he has put up more on a point-per-game basis during his career compared to Larkin, but Larkin's had some really strong numbers as well. So based on that, I would suspect that Larkin's AAV is probably going to come in a bit lower than Barzal, but certainly something that's not that far off the mark. Throw in the fact that he's also, a captain, and this has been, dragging on for negotiations for some time. They were able to start negotiations at the beginning of the UFA period this past offseason. Here we are all this time later into the season now, and things have been relatively quiet on getting a deal done. The article from Pierre LeBrun goes on to say that he feels like Steve Yzerman, at this point, you would have to think, has full intentions on keeping Larkin and getting something completed here. So we don't expect a trade. This is not a rumor to say that he's going to be dealt. But it goes on to say that he's sure that Yzerman has limits, and he may not want to pay something like the Islanders paid Barzal. Does he want to get to like $9 million on Dylan Larkin on a 7-8 year contract? Like, maybe he doesn't. I'm sure things were already tough before, and then the Barzal deal gets done, and I'm sure they're looking at that going, oh man, I'm sure Yzerman was not happy with Lou signing that deal because that's going to hurt things and put things more into players' favor to get probably even more money than he might have been looking for previously. It's hard to say. But the fact is that we don't expect a trade of Dylan Larkin at this point. It's probably fair to say that all intentions are to get an extension done. But with the price tag likely going up and the fact that Yzerman, I'm sure, has limits, you just got to wonder if things stall, depending on how things go for Detroit this year. Could they get to the point that if things are not going well, that they consider a trade? We'll have to wait and see. I think it's right now it's not super highly likely, but as each week and each month goes by and there's no deal, it just creeps up there being more likely than before. But we'll see. Lots of time yet. When it comes to Patrick Kane, Pierre LeBrun did interview his agent, Pat Brisson. Of course, is also the agent for Jonathan Toews and is also the agent for Claude Giroux, amongst many other high-profile NHL players. But of course, Claude Giroux was one of the top names at last year's NHL trade deadline who was changing teams, and in a lot of ways you could say compares to Patrick Kane in the fact that they were both with the same franchise for their entire careers, had a big prominent role in that they were at the end of their contract. The teams were going in a direction that wasn't favorable for them staying, and they are likely looking at a scenario where they're both moved. So a lot of similarities in that sense. I'm not saying they're the exact same player on the ice or anything like that, just the nature of how each career has evolved, the role they play and all that. And certainly looking at the Giroux situation last year, where it's the same agent with Pat Brisson, you would think that, there's probably going to be a lot of conversations about how things went and maybe will they learn anything from it. So LeBrun speculates that maybe, just maybe, Patrick Kane might choose to want to get something completed earlier in the season. Now, of course, Giroux's situation was a little bit different. Pat Brisson confirms in his interview that they realized by November that basically the season for the Flyers was essentially lost, and if Claude Giroux wanted to have a chance to get into the playoffs and have a chance to chase the Stanley Cup, he was going to have to go elsewhere, and he chose Florida. So we have confirmation right there that he had it narrowed down to one team and that they had made up their mind well before the deadline. But one of the things that was important to Giroux was to play his 1,000th career game in a Flyers uniform. So obviously he wanted to hit that key milestone as a Flyer. That was important as a lifelong Flyer who was drafted there, is likely going to have his jersey in the rafters. He's the captain for a long time. So that is part of the reason why a trade was so close to the deadline as it was. In the case of Patrick Kane, you know, will he have anything key of a milestone like that? Nothing that we're aware of right now that he'll want to stick around. And given the fact that based on what Giroux's comments were, is he kind of sounds like he wished he would have had a little bit more time to get acclimated and get adjusted with the new team. It's a big deal. You know, you go from playing your whole career with one team to all of a sudden you've got like less than a month left of the season and you're trying to get acclimated with new line mates, new teammates, new city, trying to get, you know, at least temporarily moved to a new place to live or a place to stay at least. It's a lot, and especially if you have a family, there's a lot of things to consider. And I wonder, for Patrick Kane's sake, based on this article and what LeBron's speculating, that maybe, just maybe, he'll want to take care of things a little bit sooner. But essentially, LeBron talked to Brisson, like I said. Brisson confirms the Blackhawks have no intentions of pressuring him to be traded. Like, there's not going to be pressure at all from the Chicago side. So essentially, when Kane makes a decision and says, okay, I'm ready, here's where I'll go, that's when they'll get on the horn and work on it. So because of that, and if you look at the Giroux situation, there really was an underwhelming return. And when you have a player that has all that control, that's what happens. The team that's making the deal knows that the player has picked them, so why should they give you any more than they really need to, right? That's just part of negotiations and how things work. So unfortunately for Chicago, they will get something in return that will be, you know, good, but, you know, but it might not be as much as you might think. I think overall the return of Giroux, I don't know if it's fair to call it underwhelming. I mean, yes, they get a pick that could be a potential, good one. We don't know what kind of player is going to come from that just yet because it's early. But, you know, at the same time, like Owen Tippett, the main prospect going back in the deal, not exactly a high-end player or somebody who's expected to be a superstar. So it's hard to say how this is going to go. I know he's been linked, Patrick Kane has, to numerous teams, including the Rangers, the Avalanche, there's lots of others. I don't know where he's going to go. If I had to bet money on it right now, I'd probably pick the Rangers, but that's just a gut feeling based on the connection to Panarin, the fact the Rangers were able to pick up another first-round pick for Nils Lundqvist earlier this year. I think they're going to be one of the top teams in the league that are really going to be gunning for a Stanley Cup. So I see a lot of things there that make sense to me. That would be where I'd place a bet right now, but it's early and it's really difficult to say how things are going to play out. But the Kane situation sounds like it very much could be very similar to the Giroux situation, and we could see it play out, but based on what we've learned from that, it might make sense for Patrick Kane to make his decision and get something done a little bit earlier than Claude Giroux did. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.